There we go. We are live. Okay, so quick video. I really have other things to do. Zabina Hassenfelder, YouTube influencer. She's a working physicist and talks a lot about science topics. Once in a while, she squeezes in something about global climate change, global heating, as I prefer to call it. And actually, it's important that we call it global heating. And this particular video explains why that is so important. One of her recent videos, she was talking about some work. I think it's James Hansen was one of the authors, but there's some. It's just a paper coming out talking about termination shock. Turns out Neil Stephenson, the science fiction writer, wrote a novel in the climate fiction genre back in 2021, also called Termination Shock. So he was writing fiction, but as often happens, it's only fiction until it isn't. And 2 years after that was published, I didn't even know if he published that, but I just looked it up, so now I know. But 2 years after that, 2023, the world experienced a sudden rapid heating that scientists couldn't explain. The usual talking heads, I want to call them a bunch of idiots, but they're trying, okay? The usual talking heads that always get platformed trotted out a bunch of explanations like, oh, it's El Nino, and oh, it's something else. And I knew at the time they were just talking through their hat. It could not have possibly been that. We've had lots of El Ninos, people, and it did not follow that profile at all. It was something completely off the radar. And I said at the time, and you can go back and find my videos, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. 2023 or 2025. So 2 years ago, maybe 18 months ago, where I was talking about what happened. And I said at the time, they'll tell you they know what happened. They don't. Maybe in the future, they'll tell us what they think happened, and maybe they will know by then. Well, okay, so finally some papers are coming out, and they're blaming the rapid heating in 2023, which continued in 2024 and continues even now. So not El Nino, not La Nina, not sunspots. Give it up, people, okay? They're attributing it to termination shock. This is complicated. No one's going to explain this to you, or if they do, they're not going to do a very good job. Most people don't really understand it who talk about it. It's a thing. It is a thing. It's an actual thing. So I did a quick... that wasn't what... That was also interesting. This is the one I did. What is the definition of termination shock? And so I'll just read this AI overview, and then there's a lot of videos about it. And Neil Stephenson talking about his book, Termination Shock. Well, actually, this is mostly about his book. But that's because there hasn't been much science about this until, like I said, just now. So let me read this for you because it may be a little blurry. Atmospheric termination shock is the sudden and potentially catastrophic return of rapid global warming, heating, that would occur if a large-scale climate intervention like solar geoengineering, I'll explain that in a moment, were abruptly stopped. So let's say the planet was getting hot and you're thinking, we need to block some sunlight. If we block some sunlight, that will keep the planet from heating. Of course, it also affects your crops. It affects your solar power output. It does a bunch of other things. You probably wouldn't like it, but you could reason. You could work this over in your brain. If we just go up in space and put up a shield, a reflective shield, we reflect some of the sunlight back, then it'll keep the planet from getting quite so hot, quite so fast. And that's called geoengineering. That's what that is. That's Earth geoengineering. You're going to engineer a solution. All right, but let's say something bad happens and you don't have the money to maintain that presence in space. Or there's actually a war about it and you have to take that presence down. Or the thing you put up only can last like 10 years or something. And then finally, the satellites or the mirrors or whatever they are, the mylar sheets, they degrade in the sun, they degrade in space, and maybe they re-enter the atmosphere, maybe they just fall apart. And so it ends. You did this intervention, you cooled the planet a little bit because you blocked the sunlight, Not a good idea, but let's say you did that. But when it ends, all that sunlight is back in play. Meanwhile, you've continued to burn fossil fuels because that's why you're doing this, right? You continue to burn fossil fuels. So there's more and more CO2 in the atmosphere. You're letting less and less light in. So you're stabilizing global heating by balancing those two out. But then when you lose your cooling effect, however you're getting it, then of course the heat starts to rise again, and that's called termination shock. And what you're terminating is the geoengineering, because you can't terminate the sun, and you can't terminate the CO2 once it's in the atmosphere, and you can't terminate the greenhouse effect. All you can do is somehow like paper it over, right? Paper it over so it's not a big deal, or not as big a deal. But then when that doesn't work, you get termination shock. Your palliative measure has been withdrawn. So what happened in 2023? That now they're saying we had an instance of termination shock. One story, I'll just roll with this, is that international shipping, cargo shipping, had been working through treaties to reduce the sulfur dioxide emissions out of fuel that's burned in the engines of these cargo ships. They don't burn diesel. A lot of them actually just burn crude oil because they burn so much of it, and they have these great big huge engines. The engines are the size of my house, and they don't need refined products. They just burn what they call bunker oil. But it's basically poorly refined or even unrefined crude oil. So they burn crude oil, and the problem was the crude oil contains a lot of sulfates. And when they are burned, and of course that means combustion, which means oxygen, one of the things that's released through the smokestack, in addition to CO2, that's not going away, is sulfur dioxide, SO2, a different O2. We got CO2, which is carbon dioxide, and we got SO2, which is sulfur dioxide. The crude oil contains a lot of carbon, a lot of energy, and some sulfur. So sulfur dioxide has long been a problem. We've been fighting sulfur dioxide emissions from coal-fired power plants. I'm trying to think if there's something else. Well, cargo ships and other things that burn really dirty fuel. Fossil fuels, very dirty fossil fuels, like lignite coal, things like that. We've been fighting sulfur dioxide, sulfate emissions for 70 years. It was the sulfur emissions from power plants that gave us acid rain back in the 70s. They started scrubbing sulfur emissions out of smokestacks of stationary power plants, and that solved, I guess, we don't talk about it anymore, acid rain. Basically, it was sulfuric acid. When the sulfates got into the clouds, it rained out as sulfuric acid. So they solved, they pretend to have solved. But the sulfate emissions were doing something else that we didn't talk about at the time, and really it wasn't on our radar. It's on our radar now. The sulfur dioxides could also work their way into the higher atmosphere. Up there, they do something different. They will eventually rain out as acid rain, but while they're up there, they create a reflective layer. Remember how a minute ago I was saying, you could have, I'm checking my stream, make sure it's working. You could have reflective mylar or something way up top of the atmosphere, or more likely in orbit, right? Reflective. And that would reflect the sun. Where the aerosols, sulfur dioxides, do the same thing. They create particles, and those particles are reflective. They're not out in space. They're in the atmosphere, but it doesn't matter where they are. When we burn fuels like coal and bunker oil, we get CO2 emissions, and we also get sulfur dioxide emissions. And those sulfur dioxides, when they get in the upper atmosphere and they form a reflective layer, the reflection somewhat offsets the greenhouse effect caused by the CO2. So that's a good thing. But once again, that's geoengineering. And if you're going to engineer the planet to have a cooling mechanism that goes along with your heating mechanism, which is the CO2 emissions, if you're going to have these two things going on, then you can't stop the cooling. You can't stop the sulfur emissions, because then you lose that and you're stuck with the heating part, because the CO2 didn't go anywhere. It never does. It's around for thousands of years, if not millions. So what happened? Well, shipping companies and countries that are maritime countries that ship a lot of goods, food, manufactured goods, cars, things like that, they started negotiating removing sulfur from fuels, cleaner fuels, so that their ships, when they're crossing the oceans, don't emit as much pollutants, sulfur dioxide. And again, this goes back to the 70s. They cleaned up the coal-fired power plants so they didn't emit sulfur dioxide, solved the problem then. Now they wanted to continue that with shipping. And it's about reducing pollutants. These ships, when they show up in port, they just sit there. When they're offloading their cargo, whatever, they sit there and they run their engines all the time. And the people that live in the area, I mean, miles in all directions, they have to breathe this stuff. And, the sulfur dioxide, when it gets in your lungs, causes acid. And so you can have chronic asthma and things like that that comes from breathing sulfur emissions. So they were like, well, gosh, we can't really have that. So everybody signed these treaties to clean up their fuel, reduce their sulfur emissions, and then when they pull into port and they're idling their engines and they're offloading their stuff, well, then it's not as big of a impact on the surrounding community. Okay, good for them, right? Good for them. They did the right thing. Along comes termination shock. 2023. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, temperature jumps a lot. People were wetting their pants over this. I mean, maybe you didn't hear about it. I heard about it. And I was like, that ain't good. I mean, it went up a lot. And it went up fast. This is like off the charts time, okay? Not an exaggeration. Off the charts. That's why it was really dumb. It's really retarded when these people started coming on. They're on CBS News and Reuters, and they're saying, "Oh, well, it's just El Nino. It's cyclical. It'll go back to what it was before." The fuck it was. They didn't fool me. I know when something is off the charts. And I said at the time, yeah, they don't even have any idea. They're just saying something so that they can stay on top of the narrative warfare. And people like Michael Mann and was that Johann Rockstrom? They're just apologists for science not having answers. So fast forward 2 years, people have been looking at it and they're saying, "Oh, yeah, we think that was termination shock." And they even said at the time, we've been reducing sulfur dioxide emissions from cargo ships. And there's a lot of cargo ships. People don't even know that, but it's true. And we did it for a good reason, because they're in port and they pollute the air and people don't want to breathe it. And that's fine. And that makes a lot of sense. But then we shot ourselves in the foot. Because now the sulfur dioxides are not going into the atmosphere. The reflective layer that we put there artificially, a kind of geoengineering, it has rained out because it doesn't stay there very long. You have to keep inputting this sulfur dioxides to keep the layer there, and as soon as you stop and they rain out, then they're not there anymore, and we lost our reflective layer. The air is cleaner to breathe. That's good, a good thing, but we lost our aerosol masking effect, which is what that's called, or at least lost most of it, or a good part of it. We lost the aerosol masking effect. That was the other geoengineering project we had going on. We really have two. We're geoengineering the atmosphere to contain more CO2. Okay. If you wanted to warm the planet, like to offset an ice age or something, that's how you would do it. You would just enhance the greenhouse effect. It might be really dangerous to do that, but if there was an immediate ice age coming and you were like, wow, we can't have an ice age, that'll put Europe under 3 miles of ice. So let's heat the atmosphere and not allow ice to form. Well, then you would do some geoengineering. And you'd put all this CO2 in the atmosphere and you'd enhance the greenhouse effect and you'd warm the planet and no ice. Problem solved, right? So that's geoengineering. Now, we didn't do it for that reason. We just did it. Why did we put all the CO2 in the atmosphere? manufacturing, making money, capitalism, consumerism, right? Flying, driving, jobs, economic growth, GDP. That's why we put the CO2 in the atmosphere. But while we were doing that, we were doing a second geoengineering experiment. We were putting sulfur dioxides in the atmosphere because that comes along with the CO2. Well, we can filter that part out. We can get rid of it, and we don't want it anyway. Acid rain, la-di-da. And so, termination shock. Termination shock. Now, 2023, and continuing since then, the atmosphere has gotten hotter. How much hotter? Well, it was a big shock when it first happened, but now you see, we're getting kind of used to it. It's the new normal. It jumps a bunch, and then, after that, it kind of stays there, and you're like, well, that's not so bad. But what happened was, it jumped. Okay, now we're used to it, but now it's up here. It's not down here where it used to be. It's up here. That's where the heating is. Termination shock. And as we continue, and here's the long and the short of it. People in this science community, in the climate science community, the Earth dynamic system community, I don't want to call it climate science, have been arguing. It's not really an argument, it's more of a discussion, right? What is the impact of the aerosol masking effect? And the flip side of the same question is, what would happen if it went away? And there have been a lot of voices like Guy McPherson, for example, who said, oh yeah, termination shock, that's going to end the world. That's going to end the human world. If we ever stop burning fossil fuels and the aerosol masking effect collapses, and it'll collapse quickly, like 90 days or so. That's why we saw the jump so quickly. And that was kind of the first clue. Whatever it was, it happened quickly. And there's nothing in the Earth dynamic system that happens quickly except, oh, yeah, right, the collapse of the aerosol masking effect. That can happen quickly. Well, apparently it did. So we saw it, and Guy McPherson was partly correct. Yes, we saw it right away. We just didn't do it deliberately. We didn't know what we were doing. There's whole other people who are managing pollutants coming from cargo ships. They were just doing the right thing for the people who live near the ports. And on accident, they terminated the aerosol masking effect. Ermagerd. So now that's a thing. That's the thing. Now, someone like Paul Beckwith knows that all this is going on. And he would tell you, well, then we have to deliberately geoengineer the Earth. We have to deliberately fly airplanes at high altitude, emitting sulfur dioxide at high altitude. We don't need to emit it in the port where the people are breathing it. Fly the jets, fly the great big jets up there, back and forth in the stratosphere, spewing CO2 emissions. And you would have tanks on these airplanes, have tanks full of sulfur dioxide. Right? Maybe even liquid form, liquid sulfur dioxide. You just spew it out of the back of the airplane in the atmosphere. That's called geoengineering. You're engineering a solution. I keep using air quotes, but these words don't have the meaning you think they do. Now, the problem with flying all these airplanes and go back and forth 24/7 is that if you ever stop doing that, you get termination shock. That's what termination means. You stop doing the thing. And so if we ever start deliberately flying cargo jets full of liquefied sulfur dioxide, and we're spraying that up there to make a reflective layer, and we ever stop doing that, why would you stop doing that? You're saving yourself from global heating. But if we ever stop doing that, then we'd suffer termination shock. The planet would immediately warm because you just got rid of your reflective layer. The geoengineering is evil. It's what you do if you don't want to do the right thing. We should stop burning fossil fuels. We should stop enhancing. We should stop our first and primary project, which is enhancing the greenhouse effect with CO2 emissions from fossil fuels. We should stop that right now. But if we do, we're going to get termination shock. So that's going to be a problem. But if we stop burning fossil fuels early on, then the termination shock will be maybe a little less, possibly. Well, what they want to do instead is they want to keep burning the fossil fuels. Burn the fossil fuels. We want to drive. We want to fly. We want to look good. We want to have money. We want GDP. We want growth. Stock increases. We want all these benefits of burning fossil fuels. We want food on the shelves. We want, vacation destinations. We have, all these industries and all this stuff we have to have. So, on the other hand, let's just make sure that the sulfur dioxides never disappear because they're helping to cool the planet. So we'll heat the planet on the one half, make our money, get our GDP growth, and then we'll cool the planet on the other half with a huge fucking project. What are we talking about? 10,000 cargo jets spewing CO2 or SO2 emissions like forever? Like for the history of ever? Hundreds of thousands of years? And that's why it's evil, because you're not going to be able to do that. And you'll say, well, we'll just solve it with enhancing the aerosol masking effect. At the same time, we're enhancing the greenhouse gas effect. Well, we'll just enhance the aerosol masking effect, and they'll balance out. That's what they'll say. They'll use words like that. This is narrative warfare. We'll just balance them out. And the average chimp will balancing things out sounds good. Can I continue to drive and fly and go to Disneyland 3 times a year? Oh, yeah. Okay, then let's do that because I'm all about Disneyland. And so that's what will happen. It's an easy sell. It's a really easy sell. And even Paul Beckwith will tell you, we need to put the sulfur back into the bunker fuel for the cargo ships because, taking it out, while it made sense for some people living around the port, it's fucked us on the global heating front because now the aerosol masking effect is collapsing and then we're going to get termination shock and we're all going to be completely fucked. So put the sulfur back into the fuel, and that's what Paul Beckwith will tell you. I'm not sure he tells you that anymore. Maybe he finally saw the light. I doubt it. He's not the only one. Everybody will say it. Everybody's all about geoengineering. Well, if you're going to geoengineer, you're signing up for a big motherfucking project. It's going to cost trillions of dollars. It's going to have all these treaty negotiations. The Russians aren't going to like it. The Chinese aren't going to like it. The U.S. isn't going to like it. And so you're going to be constantly at war about it. And if you ever stop doing it, in the future, then the temperature of the earth jumps immediately. You can never stop. Therefore, paradoxically, or maybe not, maybe it isn't a paradox, maybe it makes perfect sense. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Don't get started. Oh, well, then it's going to get hotter every single year. Well, we could cool it and keep it from happening every year and then take a big hit later, and that's what they would rather have. They would rather have the big hit come later when they're no longer in office, when they've got their quarterly bonus, when they've done when they've retired and not working anymore, when they've moved to Alaska where it's going to be cool, when they've got all their ducks lined up, well, then it's okay to terminate that expensive project that no one really liked anyway. Go ahead and terminate it now because I'm okay. I got mine. I don't care if it gets hot. I'm in Alaska. I'm in Siberia, so it's fine. I have my castle in Siberia, and I've got all my retinue and my slaves and my technology and my AI and my robots, and I'm in Siberia and I'm doing fine, or I'm on Mars and I'm doing fine. And yeah, you can stop with the flights and let the termination shock come, and I don't care. It served me while you were doing it, and we had business as usual, and now I don't need business as usual anymore, so stop doing it. And then you get termination shock, and the temperature of the planet jumps a lot because the reflective layer is suddenly gone. And that's what this discussion is about. It's all about what happens when you think you're going to control this with engineered solutions. When you think you're going to get all the nations of the world to agree to do this at massive expense forever, and then one day you're going to stop, you're not going to have the money anymore, or it's not going to be legal anymore, or there's going to be a big war about it, so you have to stop, and then you have termination shock. Is it really worth it? I don't think so. I think we should stop burning fossil fuels right now. I think we should reduce our CO2 emissions and our SO2 emissions, both of them, and take the hit. Now, we're going to have termination shock, and then we're going to have to deal with that kind of shit. And then we're going to have the lag effect of more heating because of the CO2 we've put in the atmosphere already. And could be that it gets to some tremendous level of heating that just looks absolutely lethal, stupidly lethal. So what? That's where we're at. We're in the land of stupid. That's it. That's what we've got. We've got stupid now. Everything we do is wrong. This is now a wicked problem. If we keep burning fossil fuels, then we increase CO2 in the atmosphere, but we also continue to emit sulfur dioxide, which masks some of the heating. And if we ever stop burning fossil fuels to save ourselves from global heating, well, then we also remove the aerosol masking effect. And that increases global heating suddenly and rapidly because you don't have your reflective layer. So if you continue, you're screwed. If you don't continue, you're screwed. It's a wicked problem. There is no solution. Oh, there's technology, and we'll best people, science, we'll figure it out. It's like, no, it won't. No, they won't. They haven't. And they won't. So I did a video on termination shock. Sabina Hassenfelder did it. Her videos are short. She doesn't talk a lot about this stuff. And she doesn't swear and call people motherfuckers. So I did a better job. You are going to be hearing more about geoengineering, a lot more about geoengineering. And when they tell you, oh, geoengineering, that's going to save us from global heating, and you want to be saved from global heating, don't you? Also, added benefit, if we do geoengineering, you can keep burning fossil fuels. You like the sound of that, huh? Driving, flying, right? Jobs, GDP growth, Disneyland 3 times a year. Yeah, you like the sound of that? Easy sell, right? It's an easy sell. It's a con job. CO2 is not going away. You keep burning fossil fuels, and maybe you leave out maybe you take out the SO2 component from the ship fuel, but then you re-inject it higher up using jet aircraft. Whatever you're going to do, if you start geoengineering the planet, constantly heating it, constantly cooling it, hoping for a balance, and then what happens when you can't cool it anymore? Everybody dies. And then there's the specter of we have to keep burning fossil fuels to save us from the global heating caused by fossil fuels. Well, if that's the case, then we really need geoengineering, don't we? Like a sulfate layer. And so we have to do that too. We have to keep burning fossil fuels to save us from the impacts of fossil fuels. We have to move people from islands into mainlands, and then we have to move people from places that are on fire to places that aren't on fire. And we have to, move our croplands. We have to do something about all the flooding. We have to have so many projects now that we have to use fossil fuels to do all these projects. So we can't stop burning fossil fuels. And plus, what are we going to do if people don't have their gasoline, diesel for their car, and they can't get to work, and then they're broke, and then they're homeless, and we can't have that. So keep burning the fuel, and we'll do some geoengineering over here on the other side, and we'll try to balance it out. That's going to be the sell. They'll get away with it. They won't do it, by the way. It costs too much money, but that's the sell. And everybody will say, I knew they'd figure it out. I knew they'd come up with something. Just so long as I could keep driving to work and driving my kids to school and driving to the Starbucks for my twice-a-day latte, then I'm fine with that. You fly your jets and spew your whatever that stuff is, sulfur, silicon dioxide, whatever it is, and you keep doing that, and I'll keep driving my car down here and making GDP go up, and we're all happy, business as usual. Just we have to do this other thing now, whatever that is, and that's going to be the sell. And out there somewhere on some horizon, a year, a 2, 5, it all has to stop. And then you get termination shock. And the temperature of the planet goes off the charts again. And everybody dies. Because you can't survive that. That's where the word shock comes in. It is shocking. It will kill you. It also creates moral hazard. We should be looking hard at how to reconfigure our civilization to not rely on fossil fuel consumption. What that involves? Well, I wrote the book, right? It was 100 Days, currently on Amazon. Links in the description. Can you see that? The glare is terrible. Anyway, it's a nice book. I wrote a book, and they did a great job binding it. And Neil Stephenson, right? What about Neil? What did he do? What did he come up with here? Yeah, here's his book, the novel. I'll go back to this. This is him, Neil Stephenson, Termination Shock. He wrote a novel. Now, this is what happens, right? This is what happens all the time, folks. He wrote a fiction novel. He thought it would be fiction for what, 20, 30, 50 years? I don't even know the book. I don't know what year the book takes place in, right? It's obviously in the future, but I bet it wasn't 2023. He wrote it in 2021. He probably has his book in the future like 2045 or something, right? That's not how this works anymore, people. No, I'm sorry. No, you don't have 20 years to figure this shit out. You don't have 10 years. You don't probably have 5. We are in the jaws of disaster. The time is now. It is here. It is not for fiction for much long. I wrote this book. It was 100 days. I didn't even put a year on it. It's in the near future, like 10 years, right? It was 100 Days, an end of civilization novel. I wouldn't be at all surprised if this plays itself out in the next 3 to 5 years. Wouldn't be at all surprised. We are in the pipeline now, baby. We are in the funnel. We are going down, and we are going into the slot, and that's it. We have one way to go. We're going down and into the slot, and that's where we get ground up like hamburger meat. And you'll be hearing more about termination shock. Or maybe less. It may be another one of the words that they start, embargoing and censoring, and you can't talk about termination shock. It's like you almost can't talk about global climate change anymore. And pretty soon you won't be able to talk about global heating. And a little while after that, you won't be able to talk about the greenhouse effect. And somewhere along the line, they're going to make it impossible to mention or get away with mentioning termination shock. They're taking the words away. They're taking our words away. So I'm going to mention it now while I still have the words. And now you know something, and or when you think you need to know something, you'll find this video 5 years from now. Who knows what I'm doing 5 years from now. But on this date, October 2nd, 2025, we were talking about termination shock coming to a continent near you. Maybe I should say a planet, right? Coming to a planet near you. Which planet are we talking about? This one? All right, that's all I got. Buy the book. Read it while it's still fiction. Oh, God. Read it while it's still fiction, and you don't have to worry. Also, like and subscribe. I do these things once in a while. And we'll see you for the next one. It'll be bad news, okay? In the meantime, as I usually recommend, don't die.